What's up, guys? Jeff here from Grid City Fitness and Performance. Today, I want to talk to you about 5 tips to improve your squat. Now, I'm going to be demonstrating these as I break them down so you know exactly what I'm explaining, as well as what to see and look for yourself when training, or when you might be watching someone else, maybe your friend, to see how they're performing this as well. So let's just jump right in. One of the key things for a good squat is going to be foot position, and that's number 1. Now, a good squat position, hopefully you guys can see me, is going to be feet just a little bit outside of shoulders and hip width. Now, when I say feet on the outside of shoulders and hip width, a good kind of setup position here is thinking the inner portion of your shoe is on the outer portion of your hips. At that point, the ideal squat position will be a semi-neutral foot position with the feet, the toes pointed forward. However, each individual might be a little bit different in their angle of squat. Now, the reason we want to make sure that our feet is a little bit narrower, you can go wider, you can go out here, but what ends up happening in these wider positions is it makes it unstable on your lower half. It makes it harder to balance in regards to your feet because your feet are trying to cave in or ankles rolled. It also puts a lot of pressure on the knee because when you're loading with the feet out, to squat well, your knees are going to actually kind of cave in that position, which puts a lot of interior strain and stress on the knee. So it's actually not a beneficial squat position. So ideally, first key when setting up on your squat is going to be the inner portion of your feet, just slightly wider than your shoulders and hips. From there, tip number 2 is going to be creating torque. Now, I'm going to use an upper body variation first to then explain it. But basically, torque is creating tension and pressure against the resistance of another force. So imagine you were to use a screwdriver and you put the screwdriver in the screw and then started to turn. That initial creation of force is what is considered the torque. Right? So the torque, what we're doing here is creating tension in our lower bodies. How we're going to create torque, I'm going to take my shoes off for this one. How we create torque is by imagining we're ripping the floor apart. So what I like to think about is if I imagined having my feet on saucer plates or dinner plates, and I was trying to rip the floor apart, bringing my feet out, what I'm trying to do is create torque against the floor. So right now you guys can see if I was squatting, this is just a very normal squat, not ideal, but this is just a normal squat. You can see how my knees might be tracking forward, and it's okay position. But creating torque is going to be very similar, but now what we're trying to do is rip the floor apart. Now, if you watch what happens to my knees, as soon as I start to do that, they actually bow out a little bit, right? That torque creates tension on the outer side of my hips, glutes, and thighs. This creates more engagement and more activation in my lower body. So what will happen is you want to try and create torque by ripping the floor apart. Now, what you guys might also notice is that my knees start to track out a little bit. This is the next tip and one of the more beneficial points of a good squat. From there, we're going to say tip number 3 is control position. Now, what I want you to think about with controlling position is there's 2 ways of squatting. One is just out of control. It's all over the place, just here. The other way is doing it with intent. Nice, slow, controlled. Or all over the place, right? So you have 2 different variations of squat. The goal here is to create control throughout the whole position. Control meaning upper body, so you're not falling forward as you squat. You're not losing your upper body position. You're not letting your knees cave in, because as I already mentioned, knees cave is going to be one of the big problems for knee pain and problems, as well as lower body issues. So creating control and controlling the position allows you to maintain good form, good rigidity, good activation through all muscles, and creates a good, perfect looking squat. Tip number 4 is feet find balance. Now, this is a key here, guys, because if you lose your balance while you're squatting, imagine you had a barbell on your back or a load in your front. If you're going very heavy, you're going to be all over the place. So one thing here, guys, is that you don't want to be squatting in shoes like this. These are very cushy. You guys can see how much they move. These are not going to be optimal squat shoes. The reason for that is, one, because they're going to be really, really unstable, which is going to make me feel like I'm floating or sinking all the time. The other thing is it doesn't give me good ground support, so it goes against controlling position. However, what we want to do with thinking about finding balance with our feet is I like the visual of imagining you have a couple pieces of eggshells right underneath the tips of your toes. and you're trying to put about 60% of your weight into your heel and outer foot, while about 40% right in the forefoot, right? So as I squat, what I'm not doing is rolling my heels all the way back and loading out, but allowing a perfect balance or blend over the whole entire foot. Now, I should be able to rotate a little bit of pressure outward because that's going to be part of the controlling position, creating torque in foot position. But being able to balance nice and evenly about 60-40 in back of foot to front of foot, and allowing your toes to wiggle just a little bit will give you an optimal position to keep perfect balance over your feet. And tip number 5, this is actually probably the most important for most people, but literally the most unpaid attention to piece, and that's unloading your back. Now, if you're doing a squat, such as a barbell back squat or even a front squat, you're doing the movement and going into reps. Now, what ends up happening is you end up setting yourself into a slight arch. And this arch just allows you to get initially into the hinge position of the squat. But what ends up happening is as you go through reps, your back is stuck or stays in this hinged position. So what ends up happening is your spinal erectors are engaged and activated the whole time. Now, as your spinal erectors are activated, you're going to continue to feel pressure or even light pain. Now, if you continue to stay in this arch position, my low back is going to continue to activate and activate more. So what you want to focus on is being able to unload the weight. And the simple way of unloading the weight is not taking the weight off the back and putting it on the bar, but unloading the weight in between reps or unloading the weight in between multiple reps is just simply standing all the way up and getting your hips to feel like they turn underneath you. Now at our gym, we have a warm-up movement called Pink Panther Donald Duck. And basically what I like to try and coach people into doing is going into Pink Panther or Donald Duck, depending on what part of the movement they're on. So in regards to Pink Panther Donald Duck, if you guys remember the cartoon, Pink Panther, he used to walk around with his butt out, hips back, and Donald Duck, or sorry, flip that around. Donald Duck would walk around with his hips back, chest out, tail out, whatever, while Pink Panther would walk around slouched over slightly with his hips tucked underneath him and his tail usually between his legs. Now, when we're squatting or standing up from our squat, I always want to think about trying to get my pelvic bone to rotate and go into what I consider a Pink Panther. So I stand all the way up and get those hips to turn underneath me, which allows two things. One, the joints to be stacked correctly, not putting any pressure in my low back like I am here. And it also allows me to activate and engage my glutes, which is key. Now there is a third piece, and that is allowing your body to stabilize in proper joint structure. So, those are the 5 tips to improve your squats, guys. Let's recap real quick. First is foot position. How wide are you with your feet? Your ideal foot position width should be about feet or shoulder or hip width apart. So inner portion of the feet, just on the outer portion of the hips. Your toes can be pointed forward or at a slight angle depending on what is best for you. Now from there, second piece here is going to be creating torque. So trying to apply as much force and pressure into the floor while trying to create torque against the rotation. This allows the joints to become more tight, right? The torque actually allows the joints to stabilize and almost lock into place. It puts better engagement into the glutes and hamstrings and quads, so you actually get more activation and muscle recruitment. It also keeps the joints in a better and safer position throughout the movement itself, which obviously carries over to being able to train harder, smarter, and safer. Tip number 3 was controlling position. So making sure that you are in full control the whole time. So slow tempos, controlling the movements, focusing on position. All of those things are massively important to ensure that you have a safe, proper, and optimal squat. Tip number 4 was feet balance. Thinking about keeping your balance about 60% in your heels, 40% in your toe box, and letting your toes be able to wiggle as you squat. Also thinking, pushing the pressure a little bit more to the outer portion of your shoe. So if I was here with my feet, I would think about trying to push to the outer portion of my foot versus the arch, right? So as I squat, I want to try and get as much contact point down without putting pressure into my arches. And last and finally is unloading the back or unloading the spine, which basically just means making sure you stand all the way up, get those glutes or that pelvic bone to rotate underneath you to shut off the low back, activate the glutes, and get your bones stacked properly. Now, hopefully these 5 tips can help you improve your squat, improve your strength, and improve your workouts overall, while increasing your overall efficiency and effectiveness without doing much more besides just paying a little bit more attention. These are the 5 tips to help you improve your squat.